I see some attendees. Welcome. We are going to get started shortly. All right, I think that I will go ahead and get started with a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. Workshop attendees, you can hover over your screen and you will see both a chat and a Q&A button. And you can press either of those and you'll get a pop-up box. Feel free to chat with us or ask questions in the Q&A. And we'll monitor those and make sure they all get answered. We're also broadcasting live on Facebook. So folks watching on Facebook can leave a comment and we're monitoring that as well and can make sure anything in there gets answered as well. So thank you all for joining us. Welcome to our program, Fix It Fair at Home. My name is Wing. I'm one of the coordinators of the Fix It Fairs, which are City of Portland, Oregon community resource events. With that, I would like to welcome our guest today, Jonathan from the City of Portland Office of Equity and Human Resources. Hopefully I got that right. Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us. Please take it away.
Hi, Wing, can you hear me?
I sure can.
Good. And thank you for coming, everyone. I'm glad to be here today. My name is Jonathan Simeone. I'm with the Office of Equity and Human Rights for the City of Portland. And today we're going to be talking about a very basic overview of people's rights under Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act as it relates to the City of Portland or any public entity covered by Title II of the ADA. I want to make a few just housekeeping announcements. As I will talk about in a minute, I was born totally blind. I am wearing headphones so that I can separate out the verbal cues that I get from my screen reading software and the chat and questions that are asked in the Zoom presentation. So the screen reader is coming to my headphones so that no one else has to listen to the synthetic speech but me. I will, a couple times during the presentation, give breaks for questions. I'm happy to answer any questions that folks may have. At the end of the presentation, I will give my email address and phone number, and I'm happy to be contacted by anyone who may have follow-up questions or look for more information. And also, if people want to see more presentations like this, feel free to let me know that as well. I also, since I'm doing this from home, I want to let everybody know that my cat is sitting next to my computer here. And so he may decide to make an appearance during the presentation. So if you see a cat, his name is Mr. Rogers. He's a rescue, and that will be him. The last thing I want to say is, and I decided to do this for a couple of reasons. I have asked Wing to share the presentation for me. And I did that because, number one, it is a little easier for me because the version of the presentation I want people to have on the screen has more images and is more visually appealing than the text-based version as a blind person that I prefer, and that makes it easier for me to navigate when I give the presentation without having to listen to stuff about the images being described, especially since I already know what's in them. So for that reason, and because I wanted to make this point, at the beginning of a meeting, if you organize things like this, or if you're a person who attends meetings, which all of you are, obviously, it's always a good idea for the meeting hosts to ask about folks, if folks have access needs in the registration materials, and also for if you're a person who's presenting and something makes it a little bit easier, don't hesitate to speak up and ask for things, even if they're not technically legally required. Or speak up, advocate for yourself, do what is going to make you comfortable to participate, especially in governmental events, because it's your government. We're here to serve you. And with that, I want to get into the substance of the presentation. So can we go to slide number Wing, which is my professional background.
Sure
So-
thing. Hold on just a second. I'm gonna, hadn't been sharing it, so I'll share it now.
Well, I apologize. Obviously, I can't tell whether it was up there or not. So you can just tell me when you're ready.
And you're set to go.
Okay. So I have been the ADA and Title II policy coordinator for Portland for about 3 years. That hasn't always been my title, but essentially that is what I have been doing. Previously to that, I worked at a law firm called Disability Rights Advocates in California. And sorry, my screen lost its focus. And with Disability Rights Advocates in California, I did work on helping them start their New York office and researching cases and stuff like that. Doing affidavits for people who were interested in being part of litigation, explaining to citizens their rights. I also have experience with the American Bar Association, what was then the mental and physical disability section. And there we worked on drafting articles about the law and the rights of people with disabilities under the law. So those are my main work experiences that relate to this. I do have a law license from the state of Massachusetts, where I was raised. I went to Suffolk University Law School, and I am a certified ADA coordinator by the ADA National Network and the University of Missouri. So that's a little bit about my professional background and how I got to be here today to talk to all of you. Now let's go to slide 3, please. So I have lived in Oregon since 2011. I've been a resident of the city of Portland since 2016. I was born blind, as I said in my introduction. My interests include animals, sports, politics. Those are some of my main hobbies, and I read a lot and I like to write a lot. Now we can go to the next slide, please. So what do I do for the city of Portland? Why am I here? So I develop citywide guidance and policy. And what that means is I try and help bureaus of the city of Portland, the other bureaus like Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, who's hosting us today. I try and produce guidance to help the bureaus figure out how can we follow the ADA, Title II of the ADA, and how can we be more inclusive of people with disabilities in our services. And I also train staff on the guidance that's developed, and that's done a number of ways through shared resources that I produce or find, through meetings and trainings, conversations, all the normal ways you would imagine something like that takes place. I also, just because I have a personal interest in it, and because it really does relate to the effective communication requirement under the ADA, and as a person who's blind, who uses assistive technologies, I'm very much involved in the testing and creation of accessible content. So trying to get us in a better place so where the documents we put out, the web content we put out is accessible to as many folks as we can make it. Now we can go to the next slide. This is just a very brief, with emphasis on brief, description of the ADA. So the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed in 1990, signed into law by George H.W. Bush. It underwent a very pretty substantial amendment process in 2008. And there are 5 titles to the Americans with Disabilities Act. Title I addresses the employment of people with disabilities. Title II is what we're here to talk about today, which addresses covered local governmental entities. So like the city of Portland, Multnomah County, cities and towns, and there are a few exceptions, there are a few inclusions, but basically we're talking about cities and towns. Title III is what is called places of public accommodation. So this is your restaurants, your hotels, your bars, your shopping malls, places that we go, places that are open and are supposedly accommodating the public. Title IV was addresses things like it. Probably the most well-known is the relay service, which allows people who are deaf or hard of hearing to have a relay service to make phone calls. Title V is what they call miscellaneous provisions. So it addresses how the law handles drug abuse, questions of drug abuse. It says that this law does not override more state and local laws that have more rights than does the ADA. Those are the primary pieces of each of the 5 titles of the law. But again, that is an extremely brief nutshell overview because our focus here is Title II. So we can go to the next slide. So here's our roadmap for where I am hoping we go today. We're going to talk about meaningful access, and all of this will hopefully be explained as we go along. Notice of rights, requesting accommodations, filing complaints. Those are our main subjects to be covered today. We can go to the next slide. So meaningful access. Portland has 3 versions of its meaningful access, and it's supposed to depend on how it's being used. So the long version might be on a website or maybe posted at an event. And the medium version might go on a mailing that goes out to the public. And the short version might go in an email. And the goal of these statements is to notify the public of their civil right to request access to city activities, programs, and services. It tells the public how to request any needed accommodations, and it provides contact information for city staff, so where you can address any questions, comments, or concerns about access to any city activity, program, or service. So the hope is, as it says here, that it should be in every writing from the city. Everything we put out should tell you, in a nutshell, how you can, what your rights are, that you have a right to request accommodations and modifications of policies, practices, procedures. It should tell you how to request that right. So who do you contact? And at a minimum, that's what you should have when we contact you. So now let's go to the next slide. This has the limited space version. So this is the very short version of the meaningful access. And it says, the city of Portland is committed to providing meaningful access to request translation, interpretation, modifications, accommodations, or other auxiliary aids and services. Contact, and it gives the phone number, 503, and these are X's here because each bureau would put its own phone number in these spaces, would put in the contact person of who you're supposed to contact. So that's why those are X's. But let's unpack this a little bit, because there are some words in there that may or may not be familiar to everybody here. So modifications. What is a modification? Under the Title II, you have the right to request that the city modify a policy, practice, or a procedure of the city of Portland to make your participation more inclusive. One of the most famous examples of a modification is when a venue typically says no animals, no pets allowed. Well, obviously, service animals, as defined under the ADA, are not pets. And so in that case, the city has modified its policies, practices, and procedures so that people with service animals can be accompanied by their service animals into city venues and events. So that's really the simplest way to think about a modification of a policy, a practice, or a procedure. So if you have a disability and you think that there's some rule that the city has that is making it harder for you to participate, you have a right to request that that be modified to be more inclusive. And so again, contact, let us know. Now, what is a auxiliary aid or service? Uh, And basically, an auxiliary aid or service can be almost anything somebody might need to have a more effective communication between themselves and, in this case, the city of Portland. So it could be that uh, that someone needs an interpreter if they're deaf. It could mean that a hard of hearing person needs an assistive listening device. It could be that a blind person needs a document in a more accessible format. It could be as simple as providing a note in a piece of paper or a pencil in a piece of paper so that you can exchange notes. So that's an auxiliary aid or service is anything that you need to have a more effective communication. And it's, how it's determined and all that is technical and beyond the scope of this. But basically, the city should grant, as a general rule, whatever method of communication you have an easier time with. So if you need an assistive listening device, or you need an interpreter to attend a meeting, or a document doesn't read well for you with your assistive technology, again, contact us. Let us know. That's how things improve, is when we have an idea what people are looking for. Now, there was a lot there. So I want to just pause and see if anyone has any questions. Do we have any questions?
I don't see any popping up at this time, Jonathan.
All right, then we will go to the next slide. So your notice of rights. Portland has to tell you of your rights. And it has to tell you about the services the city, or in this case, the city provides. It has to tell you about reasonable modifications, auxiliary aids and services that we just covered. And it has to tell you about how you can file a complaint. And we're going to cover complaints as we go along. But basically, what this requirement says is that there has to be a way for people to get information that goes beyond the meaningful access statement we saw in the previous slide. There has to be a way for people to find out very specifically how can they complain. What is the procedure for requesting accommodations or modifications? And these are things that when someone contacts a bureau, they should be able to get that information. There should be places where it is posted, and there is information on the Office of Equity and Human Rights website that gives some of these specific answers and helps people figure out who to contact in the different bureaus if there's something from a bureau that doesn't have contact information. So now let's go to the next slide. How do we request an accommodation? Well, the simplest thing is, of course, to start with the person who's running the event. So if you get a notice and it says, and I'm just making this up, this event, the contact person is Jim McLean at 503-823, contact Jim. That's your initial point of contact. If the event you want to attend, or if you want an accommodation that isn't related to an event, like let's say, for example, you saw something on a website that you wanted to read that wasn't accessible to you, you then can contact the bureau where the page is and you can request. You can say, hey, I was trying to read this PDF and it was untagged and I can't read it. We need to make this accessible. And again, you can find the contact information on, it should be on the Office of Equity and Human Rights page, and hopefully on the individual bureaus themselves, they have a way for you to contact somebody to provide, to ask for any accommodation that you may need. Now, the typical guidance says that you should try and request accommodations for events at least 5 days ahead of time. Now, as a person with a disability, I want to speak to the fact that that's not always real, right? We don't always know 5 days ahead of time what we want to attend. And we don't know where we might want to attend something, right? And so while that is the suggested guideline, and it makes it easier if you can follow that, I don't want people to see that and be discouraged. Because the reality of it is, if you contact the city with an accommodation request, we have to make a reasonable good faith effort to meet that request. And so don't think, if there's an event on Saturday that you want to go to and you see it Thursday night, that you can't contact us Friday and ask for an accommodation, because you can. This is just a guidepost. It would be helpful if it was followed, but as a person with a disability, I can tell you there have been times in my life when I have not followed it because it's, we can't always do that. And so reach out and we'll do our best to serve you. Let's go to the next slide. So how do we file complaints? First, I want to make a statement that maybe some people wouldn't like me to make, but I think it's important. Complaints are not a bad thing. If you file a complaint, you aren't doing anything wrong. You aren't making things bad for yourself. Complaints are a necessary part of enforcement under the ADA. It is not an easy thing to sue under the ADA. There's not really a lot of federal government oversight of Title II compliance. Complaints are actually an important part of the process because it's a way of community reaching out and saying to us, something is not working. This isn't working for me. Now, you can do that without filing a complaint. If you don't want to go through the process, you can simply call up, email somebody and say, this is what I experienced. Or, you can request an accommodation or a modification that would address the problem that you're noticing. But if for whatever reason you do not feel like you're being effectively represented or heard, file a complaint. It's your right. I will be honest, again, as a person with a disability, I have in my life had to file complaints. It's not always a pleasant experience. It's not sometimes the easiest, most comfortable thing for folks, but it is an essential part of the process. Complaints really do influence positive change. So I don't think of a complaint as a negative, and I hope you won't either. But So here's and this is just a very basic idea of the process. You can either file with the bureau involved, and I'm not going to say a bureau's name because I don't want to pick on anybody, but if you have an issue, you can contact the bureau and say, I want to file an ADA Title II complaint. If you're not sure how to go about that, you can contact Nicole Sharon in the Office of Equity and Human Rights, and she will put you in touch with the right person at the individual bureau who can assist you. And Nicole's email is on our website, but I'll just go through it real quick for folks. It's N as in Nancy, I, C as in Charlie, K, O, L as in Lima, E as in Echo, dot, Sharon, C as in Charlie, H, R, E, O, N as in Nancy, at portlandoregon.gov. Now, the whole information about the complaint process is on our website. If somebody wants to see exactly what their rights are before filing and how the process works, there is detailed information about that on the Office of Equity website. So the complaint process, and this is an important one, it does not result in any compensatory or punitive damages. In English, you won't get paid by filing a complaint. It is simply you saying, this isn't working. We have to fix this. Please help. But the complaint process with the city is not exclusive. So if you're really upset about something and you can find a lawyer, or if you want to go to the Department of Justice, you can do that even if you already have filed a complaint with the city of Portland. You do not have to, your rights to file a lawsuit or contact the Department of Justice are not in any way impacted because you've exercised your right to file a complaint with the city of Portland. The complaint must be filed within 180 days of when the incident that you're complaining about happened, or when you reasonably should have known about whatever it is that you feel resulted in you being discriminated against. So 180 days is the number to remember. You will be notified within 15 days of filing your complaint what the initial assessment of the complaint is. And that is, is your complaint accepted? Has the person working on the city's behalf determined that your complaint has merit or not? And if not, why not? What is the reason why your complaint will not be pursued? So that is in a nutshell why and how you should file a complaint. And again, you can reach out to Nicole in our office, and I'm always willing to help as well. So we can go to the next slide. And we've made it to the end of the substantive portion. So here's how you can contact me if you're interested. My phone is 503-823-1231. That's 503-823-1231. And my email address is Jonathan, Jon as in Nancy, ATHAN as in Nancy, .Simeone, S as in Sam, I, M as in Mary, EO, N as in Nancy, E, at portlandoregon.gov. And now I'll see again if we have any questions.
Thanks, Jonathan. This is Wing with the Fix-A-Fair again. We do have a few questions, and before I read them off, we got a private message asking about whether the session will be recorded, and I did reply out to all attendees, but we do record these sessions, make them publicly available. We'll make sure that they're up on our website, and I'll also be certain that Jonathan has the recording in hand when it's ready as well. And there is one person on a phone call. There is the ability to unmute, although most attendees are muted. So I'm just going to go ahead and allow the person on the phone call to talk if you want to ask a question. So I'm going to do that, and then I'll start reading through the questions we have, Jonathan. Again, if you're on the phone call, though, just speak up and let us know if you have a question. So our first question in the Q&A is, can you clarify, is the city required to get any aid requested? Can an aid be a person?
So these are very fact-specific situations. So I would never say the city is 100% required to grant every aid that is requested, because it's not. But I would say that we should, because we are here to serve the public, make every effort to accommodate you. But do we have to do whatever you say under any circumstance, whatever you ask for under any circumstance? No.
Okay, thank you. So the next question is, are there formal groups or ways for community members to get advocacy for changes at the city outside of complaints?
So, as I said, we always want to hear from the public. That's why I have put my contact information here. Anyone can reach out to me. We do not have a disability-specific advisory body with the city at this point. That is something that is under discussion, but I can tell you that the folks who work on Title II are very much interested in hearing from people with any issues, any questions or concerns folks may have.
Great, thank you, Jonathan. The next question we have is, what are the first things that come to mind as far as how city employees can do to better support access to community events and programs?
So I think the first step of any accessibility question is communication. So at a minimum, we need to be telling people, here's our event. If you need an accommodation or a modification, here's how to get it. And I'll be frank, my view is that hopefully we can work toward a standard at the city where people sort of learn to expect a minimum set of expectations around public events. And we were working on that. But obviously for the last year, everything we've done is virtual. And so the work we're not there yet, in part because we're not meeting in public. But my hope over time is that we have a minimum set of expectations. So when a person with a disability knows at every city event, these are the accommodations that is offered. And if I need something else, every person who wants to know knows clearly and unambiguously how to request something in addition to that. And that's what I want to get to when we open up and start having public meetings again.
That's great. Thank you, Jonathan. The next question is, not sure if you can answer this, but how many complaints is the city working on in any given year?
Uh, I do not do the complaints in our office. That's why I said the contact person directly for complaints is Nicole. So I actually don't have the data on that.
Maybe Nicole will join us for a future Fix a Fair presentation and we'll get some answers around that. And so one last question at this time, what is an example of a good outcome of a complaint?
A good outcome of a complaint, in my view, is where the person who filed the complaint feels like they were heard. And I want to, and I emphasize heard, not listened to, because I think there's a difference. You know, if I listen to you, I'm listening to you. But if I hear you, I'm genuinely considering what you say. And in my mind, that is the standard. I want you to know that you came to us and we took a real interest in what had happened to you, what you were encountering, how you thought it could be resolved, and that we did something with that information. As far as an outcome, I think there are two primary pieces of this. One is, ideally, obviously, we want the person to feel like they were accommodated or that the policy was modified, that whatever issue was happening was resolved and they are comfortable with the resolution. As a person who works for the city, the second piece that I hope for is that the city learns from the complaints, that we say, oh, wow, you know, that person had a point. We really need to fix this so it doesn't affect other people's ability to properly and effectively engage their government, because it is your government. We are here to serve you. And so that's why when I was talking about complaints being a positive, that's what I meant. It's a chance for us to find out in real time what is happening with you. And maybe it's going to show us that we are not doing things, in some cases, maybe as well as we thought we were. And it's our job to then learn from that information. So that's why, again, I do not think complaints are a negative.
That's fantastic. Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us today. I did drop in the comments both in the workshop and on Facebook Live how you can reach out to both you and to Fix a Fair if anyone has questions or comments afterwards. I want to thank everyone for joining us in the workshop today. And also, I saw a few people watching on Facebook. Thanks for joining us live on Facebook as well. Jonathan, thanks again. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I would just like to say thank you to everyone who came. I'd like to thank you, Wing and BPS, for putting the series of events on and for allowing me to present. And if you're out there and you have a question about anything I've said or something that I can do to make the city be more equitable and inclusive and accessible, please contact me. I'd love to hear from you and to work with you on making the city a better place for all of us to live and work and be in community.
Great. That's great. Thank you so much, Jonathan. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. And Jonathan, I'll loop back with you very soon.
What was that?
I'll loop back with you by email very soon.
Okay, great. Have
Take
a nice
care.
day.
Yeah, you too. Bye-bye.